Hello students, welcome to Time Online Classes. This is basically an online discussion on this particular mock test which you had taken a couple of days ago. The code for the test was AIMT2802201, and of this we would be discussing section D, which is the English language test. So there were around 30 questions in this, from question number 1 to question number 30. We'll be discussing the answers for each question, how to go about solving them, and wherever required, if some concepts are needed, I'll be talking about those also. This is the mock test AIMT2802201. We'll be talking about the English language test. There were around 30 questions which you had to solve in 20 minutes. So in this, basically, there are 5 different question types that are being covered. So question numbers 1 to 9 was the RC part of the reading comprehension part. There was one passage followed by 9 questions. Then question numbers 10 to 15, 6 questions were of a closed passage, where you had fill in the blanks within the paragraph. Then you had around 4 questions of the error spotting variety, 4 questions of the phrase replacement variety, and around 8 questions of the match the columns variety. So these last few questions, 15 questions, were all grammar based. So 9 of RC, 5 of vocabulary, which was closed passage, and remaining questions were all grammar based. So without any further ado, let's start with the first passage. And guys, wherever required, you can pause the video for a minute, think over what we have just discussed, or if you want to solve a question again, you can just pause the video for a minute, try doing that question, and then play it and see whether you got it right or wrong. So directions for the first 9 questions, which was the reading comprehension part. Read the following passage carefully and answer the question given below. Some words or phrases are printed in bold to enable you to identify them quickly while answering questions related to them. All right, so this is the passage. Let's quickly read through it together. So Indian banks are in collaboration with Russian banks for more than one reason. Okay. So UCO Bank and Yes Bank have put in place arrangements with 2 Russian counterparts as India seeks to step up trade with the sanctioned nation. In their condemnation for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, 13 countries have made the decision to ban Russian flights. So due to the whole Russia-Ukraine invasion that was going on, some countries have decided to ban Russian flights. There has been a sanction passed against Russia, but Indian banks are still in collaboration with the Russian banks for more than one reason. And they've talked about UCO Bank and Yes Bank. So 13 countries have made the decision to ban Russian flights. In retaliation, Russia has banned many of these nations from its airspace. So while UCO Bank, which was the agency responsible for rupee trade with Iran, has tied up with Gazprom Bank, Yes Bank and Petersburg Social Commercial Bank also have an agreement in place. Sources familiar with the discussion said. SBI has also said that it is exploring the options of payment arrangements with Russian banks. So the whole airspace banning thing is an example of the kind of bans that Russia is facing. And within this whole situation, Indian banks are still collaborating with Russian banks. So it's given me an example of UCO and Yes Bank, which is already doing that. And SBI is also trying to explore certain arrangements if possible. So he has spoken about more than one reason. So let's see whether the remaining paras throw some more light on what those reasons are. So UCO Bank and Gazprom Bank are said to have put in place the arrangement after the RBI set up a mechanism involving the opening of a special Vostro account through which payments are to be routed. So RBI set up a mechanism. They opened a special Vostro account through which the payments from Russia to the Indian bank could be routed. And after that, UCO and Gazprom Bank brought in this whole arrangement. So the absence of a formal arrangement, businesses were routing payments in euros and other currencies, often through the Gulf, which had affected some of India's exports. On the when there was no formal arrangements, they were basically routing payments in euros and other currencies, and they were doing it through the Gulf. Because of it, somewhere India's exports were getting affected. So this arrangement is now solving that problem. On the other hand, ongoing sanctions on Russia resulted in a huge gap in exports to Russia by those nations that are prevented from doing business with Russia. So because there is a sanction against Russia, countries are not able to do business with them. So there is a huge gap in the exports, and this gap is what India is trying to fill. So with shipments of goods from Europe and the US hit by sanctions, Indian exporters sense an opportunity in Russia, especially when it comes to sectors such as pharmaceuticals, food products, textiles, and telecom equipment. So the two reasons that why Indian banks are in collaboration with Russian banks were, the first one is that when there was no formal arrangement in place, the Indian exports were getting affected because businesses were routing payments in euros and other currencies. So by having this arrangement, that problem is getting solved. And the other thing is, because of these sanctions, other countries are not able to do business with Russia. There is a gap in their exports. So Indian exporters have sensed that there is an opportunity over here, especially in sectors such as the food industry, pharmaceuticals, textiles, telecom equipment, etc. So they're trying to fill that gap by sending their exports there, by sending their imports there. Okay. For a different reason, the SBI is likely to collaborate with Russian banks that are not subject to sanctions and to remain in the Society for World Bank Interbank Financial Communication, that is the SWIFT network. So there is a different reason for which the SBI wants to collaborate with the Russian banks that have not yet been put under the control of these sanctions. So what is that reason? To create a special rupee Vostro account for invoicing in Indian currency. So mainly to create this SRVA or special rupee Vostro account, they are still collaborating with the Russian banks. So in a statement, the in the country's largest lender, which is SBI, stated it's not been designated as the nodal bank for Russia-related transactions. So while the SBI is doing transactions with Russia, but it's not been designated as the nodal bank. So it's not that they are in charge of the whole thing. Okay. So subject to certain restrictions, the RBI enabled Indian banks, including the SBI, to operate an SRVA, the Security Risk and Vulnerability Assessment, in July to encourage invoicing in Indian rupees. So the bank in a statement said it's making necessary arrangements and processing requests received from various banks, including the Russian banks, following the guidance laid out by the RBI. So the whole idea over here is that Indian banks are collaborating with Russian banks. He's given an example of UCO Bank. Yes Bank also said that SBI is trying to explore options of payment arrangements. He talks about the reasons being that firstly, they are trying to not remove the problems on the Indian exports. Second thing, there's an opportunity for Indian exporters because there's a gap in the exports to Russia. He also talks about the collaboration of SBI with Russian banks that are not subjected to sanctions and to remain on the SWIFT network. So for this purpose, the RBI has enabled Indian banks to operate an SRVA. So they are saying that they are trying to therefore make arrangements for processing requests from various banks, including Russian banks. So it's a slightly technical passage. Or more on the economics and the banking front. But generally, the advantage of such technical passages is that most of the questions would be what we call data-based questions. So one wouldn't have to think too much. One can directly, even if one didn't understand the whole passage, if one gets an overall idea of what is going on, the questions can be solved really quickly. So let's take a look at them. What is the main idea of the passage? Okay. So Indian banks in collaboration with Russian banks to facilitate transfer of funds. That is what the whole discussion was about, on how Indian banks are collaborating with Russian banks to do all this fund transfer. The reasons behind that, how can it be done, so on and so forth. So one could be a possible answer, but let's quickly check the remaining options as well. So new rules and regulations of the RBI for foreign banks to begin business in India. But that is wrong. While there are some new rules and regulations, that's not for foreign banks to begin business in India. That's for the Indian banks to collaborate with the foreign banks and not for them to begin business. So 2 is definitely eliminated. SBI and other Indian banks in collaboration with foreign banks, but the bigger focus was on Russian banks, and only towards the end we talked about other banks, including Russian banks. So that can't be the main focus of the passage. So 3 also gets eliminated. Initiation of transfer of funds in the currency rupee, that's totally general. And guidelines of the RBI to Indian banks that want to open offices in foreign countries, no. This is more of fund transfer and doing business, and not so much so of opening offices out there. So my answer has to be option number 1. Then let's go to the second question. Indian banks want to collaborate with Russian banks too. So what is the reason that Indian banks want to collaborate with the Russian banks? To earn foreign exchange? No, because he talked about having fund transfer and to take advantage of the opportunity of exports, as was mentioned in the second paragraph. To ease transfer of funds and take advantage of trade opportunities? Yes, that's what was mentioned in the second para. So one point he had mentioned affected some of India's exports. And second thing, a huge gap in exports to Russia, and there was a trade opportunity as a result. So option 2 does cover all of this. Expand their businesses in parts of Russia? No. It's more of collaborations and not so much so entering into the Russian market. Improve the value of currency of both India and Russia? No, the main focus is on the rupee, not so much on the Russian currency. To become nodal banks for relations with Russian banks? No, they have very clearly said that they have not been designated as the nodal bank for the Russian related transactions. So 5 is contradictory in nature. Hence my answer has to be option number 2. That these collaborations are basically happening so that transfer of funds can be easier and they can take advantage of the trade opportunities. Option number 2. So if we see this was a straightforward data question, I could get it straight from the passage. Why do Indian exporters find it an opportunity to improve trade relations with Russia? Now, if you look at the second para, they had said that the ongoing sanctions on Russia have resulted in a huge gap in the exports by those nations that are prevented from doing business. So therefore, Indian banks are sensing an opportunity. That there is Indian exports are sensing an opportunity. There's an opportunity because due to these sanctions, many of the countries that were normally doing business are not able to do so. So there is a gap which the Indian exporters can satisfy. So let's see which option talks about this. Agricultural products are cheaper in Russia as it uses only organic farming. No, that's totally out of context. Russia is lenient in its trades with Indian tradesmen. That's also not covered. Due to sanctions on other nations, competition is vastly reduced. Yes, as there is a sanction, there is a gap in the exports. Other countries are not able to do business with Russia. So India is sensing an opportunity out there. India and Russia are involved in climate change pacts. That's nowhere covered. So that gets eliminated. India and Russia are involved in arms manufacture. Again, that's not covered anywhere. So my answer has to be option number 3. That as other countries are not able to participate, there is a drop in the competition, and that is what India is trying to take advantage of. All right. Which of the following are true as per the passage? UCO Bank is tying up with Gazprom Bank. Yes, as was given out there, they have put in place a certain arrangement. It was also mentioned in the first para. UCO Bank has tied up with the Gazprom Bank. So definitely 1 is covered. SBI is tying up with Yes Bank. No, SBI was tying up. SBI tie-up had not been mentioned. Yes Bank was tying up with the PSCB, the Petersburg Social Commercial Bank. So 2 gets eliminated. Yes Bank and UCO are together in the tie-up with Russian banks. No, UCO is doing it separately. Yes Bank is doing it separately. They're not doing it together. What does option number 3 mean? They're getting together to do trade with the Russian banks, but that is not covered anywhere. So my answer has to be only 1, which is option number 4. Now guys, you'll have to be a little careful out here because by default, we assume that an option like only 1 would be option number 1. But sometimes the examiners, to take advantage of this natural instinct that we have sometimes, can jumble up the options as is over here. So 2 is only 2, 3 is only 3, but 4 is only 1. And it may happen that in the exam in a hurry, without looking at the option, I might mark 1 as the answer. So make sure you're reading the option carefully, see which option is the correct one, and then mark it as the answer. So only 1. It can be inferred from the passage that the Indian banks operate under the. Now, if I check over here, the RBI has enabled the Indian banks, including the SBI, to operate an SRVA, which means whatever Indian banks do is under the control of the RBI. So let's see which option talks about that. Indian banks operate under the Russian banks, no. Government of India, possibly yes, but that's a much wider point. Of course, one can say that the government controls the RBI and therefore the government also controls the Indian banks, but then that's going beyond the scope. Let's see if there's an option that talks about the RBI. Rules of the SBI, no, SBI is also under the rules of the RBI. The aegis of Gulf banks. Now, what does aegis mean? Control, protection, control, etc. But do the Indian banks work under the control of the Gulf banks? Absolutely not. So option 4 gets eliminated. Aegis is control or protection. And lastly, option 5 says under the aegis of the RBI, which is what we were talking about. So between 2 and 5, therefore, I can go for option number 5 because that's more specific to the discussion, whereas 2 is relatively general. So Indian banks operate under the aegis of the RBI. Option number 5 would be the right answer. All right. Then it can be inferred that SBI is getting in collaboration with Russian banks that are. Okay. So if we see over here, what he had said was the SBI is likely to collaborate with Russian banks that are not subject to sanctions. So those Russian banks that are not controlled by those sanctions, with them the SBI is likely to collaborate. So if we say wealthy, no. Powerful, no. Huge, no. What does free mean? They are not controlled by a sanction. They are collaborating with those kind of banks that are not controlled by the sanction, that are free to transact. So my answer would be option number 4. It can be inferred that SBI is getting in collaboration with the Russian banks that are free, that are not under any sanctions. Therefore, they are free to do business. Option number 4. Good. Which of the following is true about SBI as given in the passage? It's not a nodal bank for transactions related to Russia. Yes, it was given here. The country's largest lender stated it has not been designated as the nodal bank for Russia-related transactions. So one is definitely covered. Now the SBI, as per this, is the country's largest lender. So 2 is also covered. It's in collaboration with banks in many foreign countries. No. If I look at the last line, it says it is making necessary arrangements in processing requests received from various banks, including Russian banks. So they are trying to see with whom they can collaborate. But right now, they are not under those collaborations. So 3 gets eliminated. Do I have an option called 1 and 2? Yes, option number 3. Option number 3, 1 and 2. So that becomes my answer. What is true about the SBI? It's not a nodal bank for transactions related to Russia. It's the largest lender in the country or in India. So option number 3. Okay. Now the vocab questions within the passage. Select the word which is most similar to the word given in bold. Sanctioned. Where is sanction given? Out here. Now luckily such words are always in bold, so we can quickly locate them. So UCO Bank and Yes Bank have put in place arrangements with 2 Russian counterparts as India seeks to step up trade with the sanctioned nation. In their condemnation for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, 13 countries have taken the decision to ban Russian flights. So your sanctioned is more in terms of ban. Now the word sanction basically means a kind of permission. The permission can be either to do something or not to do something. And in this context, it's in the sense of a ban. So my answer has to be option number 2. Now, as per the definition of the term, technically all 5 are correct. That's why in these questions, we have to be careful to see what is the contextual meaning as per the usage. and mark that as my answer, which in this case would be option number 2, banned. Sometimes, especially if these words are words that we are very comfortable with, we might be tempted to save some time, not look for it in the passage, and directly mark my answer. But as we just saw, the usage could be very different from what we know to be true. So always make sure you're locating the word in the passage, seeing the contextual usage, and then mark your answer. And as these words are in bold, it will be easier for us to look for them. So option number 2, banned. Now let's come to the last question. Select the word which is the most opposite in meaning to the word given in bold as used in the passage. And the word here is affected. So in the absence of a formal arrangement, businesses were routing payments in euros and other countries, often through the Gulf, which had affected some of India's exports. So this had basically brought down India's exports. So I need an option that says that it's the opposite of bringing down. So encouraging something, helping something to do well, etc. Facilitated. To facilitate is to help something happen. That would become my answer. So the opposite for the word affected as used in the passage would be facilitated, which resulted some of India's exports. No, that would be incorrect. Cause, no, it's not a direct cause. It's more of increasing the quantity or decreasing the quantity. On the same reason, produced and made are also eliminated. If I see 2, 4, and 5, all of them, just a minute, guys. So sorry. Yeah. So 2, 4, and 5 all talk about it in terms of directly creating the exports. But we are talking about increasing the export quantity or decreasing the export quantity. That comes out only in option number 1. So these were the 9 questions related to the RC. I hope it's clear how we analyzed and marked the answer for each. In the exam also, quickly read the passage, get an overall idea of what is going on, and then take 1 question each. Sometimes if you feel that a passage is too difficult and you're not able to keep track of what is going on, you can just quickly write down the keywords. So para 1, 3, 4 keywords, para 2, 3, 4 keywords. That way you know exactly what is going on and it becomes easier for you to mark the answer. All right. Let's now come to the next question. In the given passage, there are blanks, each of which has been numbered. Against each, 5 words are suggested, one of which fits the blank appropriately. Find the appropriate word in each case. Now, this is an example of a closed test. So I have around 6 questions. There are 6 blanks. Gives each blank I have 5 words. I have to see which one is correct. So closed test is nothing but fill in the blanks within a paragraph. So the trick over here is first read the whole paragraph, even with the blanks, because it can happen that the clue for the answer to one blank could be in the very next sentence. So read the blank, understand what is going on, and then try to mark the answer. The British pound dashed to a record low against the US dollar. It happened after the British government announced it would cut taxes and invest in industry in order to dash growth. While a falling pound will be good for British exporters, traders are betting that the budget unveiled by the new Prime Minister Liz Truss will lead to higher dash and have seen the value of the country's currency plummeting. Plummeting is falling in response. There's every chance that a falling pound will make life more expensive. Anything the UK must dash from overseas, from raw material to household basics, would now be pricier. The new inflationary outlook, inflation is rise in prices, has brought about a standoff with the Bank of England, which may now be forced to raise interest rates to dash off rapid price increases. But higher interest rates could dash the economic growth Truss and the government are seeking, hence the plunge in the pound. So the overall idea here is the British government announced it would be cutting taxes and investing in industry. Due to that, the pound started falling. And now when the pound started falling, due to that, the prices increased. There's a chance of prices increasing. There's an inflationary outlook, and the author says it can be a big problem for the country. So with that in mind, now let's check out the options. The British pound dashed to a record low against the US dollar. It has gone down, it has fallen down. That's why the word low has been used. So rocketed is increased in price, that gets eliminated. A rocket, the way a rocket grows up, it would be an increase. But a plunge is a fall. So that would be my answer. Because I'm talking about a record low, that means it has to fall down or it has to plunge. So 2 can be my possible answer. Slinked, no. Actually, there's a typing mistake here. It is synced. But then it's not sinking. It's falling down. So 3 gets eliminated. Soared is again a rise. So that also gets eliminated. And sided is take the side or support it. That's irrelevant out here. So for the 10th one, my answer has to be option number 2. The British pound plunged or fell to a record low against the US dollar. All right. So it happened after the British government announced it would cut taxes and invest in industry in order to dash growth. Now, why do we cut taxes and invest in industry? Because we want to increase our growth. No government wants to make it fall. So 11th one, I need an option that talks about increasing the growth. So doubt growth, no, that would bring it down. Retard is also to fall. So that would also be eliminated. To pull growth, but growth is not something that can be directly pulled up or pushed down. So that word here is inappropriate. Mark growth. Again, I'm not talking about highlighting something, but boost growth. Now to boost is like rocketed, increased. So my answer would be option number 5. It happened after the British government announced that it would cut taxes and invest in industry in order to boost growth. Okay, so because of that, the British pound has fallen because people were scared that the government is going to cut taxes. Therefore, they withdrew money, and due to that, the British pound fell. So while a falling pound will be good for British exporters, traders are betting that the budget unveiled by the new PM Liz Truss will lead to higher dash and have sent the value of the country's currency plummeting in response. Now plummeting is falling, as we just saw a little while earlier also. So why would people be scared and why would they send the value of the currency falling down? Because they're somewhere worried that due to this budget, the prices might increase. That's when people are going to get scared. So we need something like inflation, which means a rise in prices. So what is stagnation? Stagnation is basically when inflation happens, but with stagnated growth. But that's not what we are talking about. So we are basically talking about a situation where there's only inflation. Stagnation is a case where there's inflation along with low growth. That would be irrelevant over here. Recession, as we know, is a fall in growth. But again, we are talking about inflation. Deflation is the opposite of inflation. So that gets eliminated. Option number 4, inflation. So while a falling pound will be good for British exporters, traders are betting that the budget unveiled by the new PM Liz Truss will lead to higher inflation. So I'll just repeat, stagnation is inflation with a stagnant growth or a stopped growth. That would be incorrect. Recession is when the economy stops growing. That would be incorrect. Deflation is fall in prices. But I need inflation, which is rise in prices. So option number 4. Okay, will lead to higher inflation and have sent the value of the country's currency plummeting in response. So because the traders were worried that the budget will lead to inflation, so they withdrew money, and due to that, the value of the currency, they are worried that it will lead to higher inflation, and in turn, the country's currency will fall. There's every chance that a falling pound will make life more expensive. Anything the UK must dash from overseas. So do you buy from overseas or do you sell? You sell to overseas, but you buy from overseas. So option number 1, purchase. Anything that the UK must purchase from overseas. Discount is, again, whether I give a high price, whether I give a low price, so that is irrelevant. Sell to. After sell, I need the preposition to. So that is wrong. Bargain is again like discount. And I could use trade, but with trade, the preposition used is with. I trade with overseas countries. But if I say out here, I've used the preposition from. So I can't use trade, therefore, I use purchase. There's every chance that a falling pound will make life more expensive. Anything the UK must purchase from overseas, from raw material to household basics, would now be pricier. It will be more expensive. The new inflationary outlook has brought about a standoff with the Bank of England, which may now be forced to raise interest rates to dash off rapid price increases. So due to the inflationary outlook, the Bank of England is now forced to raise interest rates to avoid the price increases. So what do they think? As inflation will be there, there could be price increase. So to do that, if they raise the interest rates, people will stop spending money. When interest rates are raised, people start saving more, and due to that, the price can be further brought down. So to tank off rapid prices increase, no. Dawn off, no. Ward off, yes. The phrase ward off means to avoid. All right. There's a phrase called warding off something, which means to avoid it. So let's say, for example, they say ward off the evil eye. So if you feel that someone is casting an evil eye on someone you love or a family member, you try to ward off the evil eye by performing certain rituals. So they are forced to raise interest rates to ward off rapid price increases. Option number 3. But higher interest rates could dash the economic growth. So it could be basically, if interest rates are higher, people will stop spending money, they'll save more, and due to that, the economic growth can be brought down. Hence the plunge in the pound. So what they're worried about is high interest rates could reduce the economic growth. So let's see which option talks about reducing. That would have to be option number 4. To prevent the economic growth and that Liz Truss and the government are seeking. So basically, they did something thinking that this would lead to economic growth. So they basically decided to cut taxes and to invest in industry. But the author is worried that there would be a repercussion, that as a reverse thing, actually the interest rates would increase, due to which the economic growth would come down. And because of that, the pound has fallen down. So slightly technical passage, but we would be able to figure it out via the options. Just to repeat the answers again, 10th was option number 2, plunged. 11th was option number 5, boost. 12th was option number 4, inflation. 13th was option number 1, purchase. 14th was option number 3, ward, because the phrase is ward off. And 15th is option number 4, prevent. I hope this is clear, guys. With this, we are done with the closed test, and it's always good to try a closed passage in the exam, because you get a single para with, like, say 5 questions or 10 questions, and it's very rare that you would not be knowing the answers to any of the questions. So suppose it's a tough one, even then out of 5 you would be knowing 2 or 3. So it's good to try those, and you can leave the ones that you don't know. So at least you will get a boost with the questions that you are aware of. Similarly, if it's a 10-question closed passage, you'll definitely be knowing the answers to 6 or 7. So you can try those 6 or 7, and you can leave the 3 or 4 that you don't know. That way, again, you would at least get some more marks. So we always recommend to try a closed passage without doubt. But as we said, first read the passage, understand what is going on, and then try to mark the answers. All right, guys, now let's move on. Now we have the grammar questions. Question number 16 to 19 are basically on error spotting. So in each of the questions below, a sentence is split into 4 parts. So read it, identify whether there's any grammatical error. The error will be in one part of the sentence. So there's only one error in one part. And mark the part with the error as your answer. If there is no error, mark no error. So option 5 is no error. If there's no error, I'll mark that as the answer, and ignore errors of punctuation. So commas, full stop, semicolon, those we can avoid. the country typically seeks to maximize the geopolitical impact of their tests with careful timing. So let's now examine each. The country typically seeks, okay, seems to be all right, to maximize the geopolitical impact, okay, of their tests. Now there is a concept in grammar called subject verb agreement, which means that the subject is singular, associated verb is singular. Subject is plural, associated verb is plural. Similarly, you also have noun pronoun agreement. So if there's a pronoun that refers to a noun, if the noun is singular, the pronoun will be singular. Noun is plural, pronoun will be plural. Similarly, even gender-based. So if the noun is masculine, pronoun is masculine. Noun is feminine, pronoun is feminine. Noun is neutral, the pronoun is neutral. So over here, I have a pronoun there. The noun for this there is the country. It's referring to the country. Whose tests are we talking about? The country's tests. But country is singular. We are not talking about countries. We're talking about only country. And there, as we know, is plural. So this is definitely wrong. I should use its. The singular form of there is its. So my error definitely is in part number 3. Of course, over here you do not have to mark the, you don't have to give the correction, you just have to mark the error. But for our knowledge, I've also given you the correction. In the exam, of course, you'll only mark 3 and you will proceed ahead. The country typically seeks to maximize the geopolitical impact of its tests with careful timing. So the error definitely is in part number 3. All right. Now let's go to the 17th one. She said that she could not afford to bring up a child because she did not have a job and did not come from an affluent family. Affluent, of course, means rich, rich or prosperous. So the idea is, as a lady, she's saying she cannot bring up a child, and the reason she gives that is she does not have a job and she doesn't come from a rich family. So because of that, she doesn't have the required resources, hence she can't bring up the child. Let's now check each option carefully. She said that she could not. Okay, now I'm talking about a past tense scenario. She said she could not. They are both okay. Effort to bring up a child. To bring up is to raise. So that's also all right. Because she did not have a job. Again, tense-wise, simple past is being maintained and did not come from an affluent family. So the entire sentence seems to be fine. There's no problem. My answer is option number 5, no error. This is a case where the sentence is grammatically correct. I'll mark 5 or no error as my answer. Now, technically, it's always better to not have no error in the options, because if there is no error, if there's no option called no error, that means I'm definitely sure there's going to be an error. So my life becomes easier. Whereas with the no error option, I also have to entertain the possibility, as in this case, that the sentence could be right. That makes my job a little more difficult. But yeah, option number 5, no error, would be the answer. Then let's go on to the next question. The smog in the city is so bad, dozens of kites, the birds of prey, fall from the sky every day. Here by kite, we mean the eagle kind of kite, the bird that we are talking, but not the flying kite. We're talking about the bird kite. Smog is, of course, smoke plus fog. So pollution, the pollution is so bad, so dozens of birds are falling from the sky every day. So let's check each part. The smog in the city is okay. So bad, dozens of kites. Now there's a cause and effect relation here. The smog is bad, so dozens of kites are falling from the sky. But there is no such word over here to connect the two. Therefore, they seem as two separate sentences. I definitely need a that after bad. As we know, so that can be used to indicate a cause-effect linkage. So the movie is so boring that we fell asleep, or the class is so interesting that we paid attention throughout the duration. So here we need a that between bad and dozens. So now the corrected form would be, the smog in the city is so bad that dozens of kites, the birds of prey, fall from the sky every day. So definitely part number 2 has an error. I need a that out there. Again, like I said before, I'm giving you the correction only for your knowledge. because in the exam you only need to mark the error. So there's a scenario where you're not sure that what would be the correction, but you're sure that there is an error, you can still mark that as the answer. Because what we need to be sure about is whether there's an error in that part or not. So definitely option number 2. Good. And lastly, the 19th one in this set, a majority of the public believes nature is under threat and needs urgent action to protect and restore it. Okay, so people feel that nature is under a threat or under a problem. Therefore, nature needs urgent action to protect and bring it back to its original glory. So let's check each set now. A majority of the public believes. But now the problem is the word public is plural because it talks about people in general. So public is always a plural entity, whereas believes is singular. Now, how do we work this out? He believes, they believe. So believes with the S is singular and believe that does not have the S is plural. So you don't need to by heart, you just have a sentence and check over there and see. So like in this case, I had a singular sentence in mind, he dash, and a plural sentence, they dash. I just checked out there what would come. So he believes that this is right. They believe that this is right. So believes is singular, believe is plural. I'll change believes with believe. There's definitely an error in part number 1. The corrected sentence is a majority of the public believe nature is under threat and needs urgent action to protect and restore it. So definitely option number 1. So with this, guys, I come to an end to the error spotting part. Now we'll move for the phrase replacement questions. But error spotting, that's the whole thing. Even if I do not know what the correction is, but I'm sure that there is an error in that part, I can still mark that and proceed ahead. Now let's move on to phrase replacement. Which of the phrases given below each sentence should replace the phrase in bold to make it grammatically correct? So there's a part that's given in bold. There are 4 corrections given for it. And if the sentence is correct and no correction is required, mark 5, no correction. So again, out here I have a 5th option called no correction, which makes my job a little difficult. Because if I do not have that, I can definitely be sure that there's going to be an error. But the advantage over here is I have options. I have corrections. So even if I am not really sure when I read the question, I can still compare the options. With that, I'll get a clear idea of what is right and what is wrong. So keeping that in mind, let's check out now. She studied online videos about road trips and set off across China alone in a VW hatchback with a pension and a rooftop tent. This and set off across part is wrong. Now is the bold part that I need to check. Now, do I say set off across? No, I'll say set across off China. So the position of the off is definitely wrong. I should say set across off China or set off across China, in which case I'll need a double F. So I can say she set across China. I don't need that off at all. That could be one way of doing it. She studied online videos about road trips and set across China or set off across China with a double F, O double F. So let's see which option has that. Set off cross, but I need an across and not just cross. So one gets eliminated and across set off. Again, the position of across is wrong. Set off across China, which is what we were talking about. Set O double F across China. So my answer definitely is option number 3. Settle off across is wrong. And because there is an error, option number 5 is also wrong. So option number 3. Now in this case, of course, I already gave you the answer before. Then we just saw which option can be chosen. But even if one did not know the answer, one can still figure it out via the option. Let's try the next question that way. I'll not give you the answer directly. Let's see if we can figure it out via the options. There's still time for them to right wrongs of the past. Okay. So the bold part is right wrongs of the past. Let's check the options. To write the wrongs, the, but I need an off over here. So definitely one gets eliminated. To write the wrongs of the. Now the only difference between the question and option 2 is the article the. Now, am I talking about specific wrongs? Now, what are wrongs? Mistakes. So I'm talking about the specific past by saying the past, which means a specific past needs to have specific mistakes. So this the is required. So my answer has to be option number 2, which means no correction is automatically wrong. To write wrongs off, but again here both those are missing. I need a the over here. I also need a the after off. Both those are missing. So 3 gets eliminated. To write and wrongs. Now this is totally wrong. So fourth one also gets eliminated. So my answer is option number 2. So in this case, I didn't try to first think of the answer and then check the options. I solved the question via the options itself. So both methods can be used in the exam. One, you could first directly think of the right answer and then see which option talks about that. Or if you have less time, you can just quickly check the options and then see which one is the appropriate one. All right. The speech was the highest point of long practice lawyerly and parliamentary technique. Okay. So I'm talking about a technique that has been practiced for a very long time. It's both lawyerly as well as parliamentary. Now, technique is a verb, so lawyerly and parliamentary are adverbs. Or if I look at technique as a noun, they are adjectives, either way. So, by the looks of it, the question seems to be fine. But let's quickly check the options also. Long practice lawyer and parliamentary. But lawyer is a noun. I need lawyerly. So one gets eliminated. 2 says long practice lawyerly, okay, but parliament is wrong. I need to say parliamentary because parliament is a noun. Parliamentary would be its adjective form. So 2 gets eliminated. Longing practice, but this is totally wrong because longing is not appropriate here. Long practice. Now lawyerly parliamentary is correct, but I need to say practiced because practice is a verb. Practiced would be its adjective adverb form. So 4 also gets eliminated. So the question itself is appropriate. There's no correction that is required. The speech was the highest point of long practiced lawyerly and parliamentary technique. So a certain technique that is very lawyerly and parliamentary that's required to be used in a court or in a parliament. The speech was the highest point of it. So option number 5, no correction required. And lastly, the question number 23rd. He worked long hours and earned well, but was almost always too exhausted to enjoy his life. Now, while reading itself, what I realize is this TO is wrong. I need TOO. As we say, he's too tired to talk today, or she's too excited to listen to anything else. So it's always a TOO2 and a TO single O combination. TOO and TO. So let's see which option talks about that. Almost always too exhausted to, but here the words are interchanged. This should have been TOO, this should have been TO. So one is definitely out. Almost always too exhausted, but this TOO is wrong. It should have been TO. So 2 is eliminated. Always almost too exhausted too. Now here TOO and 2 are fine, but the always almost are interchanged. So let's keep this on hold. Almost always too exhausted too. So here almost always is as per the question, and TOO and 2 have been corrected. So 4 can also be a possible answer. And as we saw, because the question definitely is wrong, 5 is eliminated. Now the only difference between 3 and 4 is the position of always, almost. So in 3 it is always, almost. 4 it is almost, always. Now, when I say he is always too exhausted, that means it's a regular occurrence. It happens on a daily basis, and almost always. So it's like if I take it on a scale of 1 to 10, 9 out of 10 times he's always exhausted. So this always has to modify the to exhausted part, and this almost has to modify always. So I can't say always almost. I have to say almost always, because always is modifying the to exhausted part and almost is modifying the always part. So I have to say almost always and not always almost. My answer definitely is option number 4. How do I work it out? He's always too exhausted. So he's completely exhausted. And when I say almost always exhausted, that means 9 out of 10 times or 8 out of 10 times, he's always exhausted. So I have to say almost always too exhausted to enjoy his life. So option number 4 would be the right answer. So with this, guys, I'm done with phrase replacement. Phrase replacement is pretty simple because luckily I have the options given as replacements for the bold part. So even if I'm not able to directly figure out the answer, I can do them via the options. Okay. And now lastly, for the last set of questions, 24 to 30, these questions have 2 columns, 1 and 2, containing 3 phrases or clauses each. So in the first column, the phrases or clauses are A, B, and C. Second column, D, E, and F. So match 1 with 2 such that the sentences so formed are both meaningful and grammatically correct. So as in this case, if I take a look at this question, there are 2 columns, A and 1 and 2. So in 1, I have 3 parts, A, B, C. In 2, I have 3 parts, D, E, and F. And I have to see which of them, if matched, create a complete sentence. Now, one way of solving this could be, I check A, D, A, E, A, F, B, D, B, E, B, F, C, D, C, E, C, F. I'm talking about 9 permutations and combinations, but that will take a lot of time. Instead, better to do these questions via the options. So option 1 says BE and CF. Let's check. What does BE say? Conflict arises between 2 friends when one of them abruptly ends their friendship with alarming consequences for both of them. So when one friend ends the friendship, there is a conflict between the two that leads to a lot of problems. So BE seems to be grammatically fine. Let's check CF. Shot with breathtaking beauty and acted with extraordinary emotion, this exploration of the life of Emily Bronte is tremendously enveloping. So this is also fine that this documentary or movie has been shot with a lot of beauty and acted with a lot of emotions. It's very enveloping or absorbing. One can't stop thinking about it. So option number 1, B and CF seems to be fine. If I check AE, life aboard the ship turns fraught with alarming consequences. Okay, for both of them. But when I'm saying life aboard the ship in general, I have no way of knowing whether there are 2 people or more than 2 people. But there was some, like in option number B, we had mentioned 2 friends. So I knew B and D could be connected. But unlike that, in option A, there is no indication that there are only 2 people. So A and D cannot be connected at all. So 2 gets eliminated. If I look at AF, life aboard the ship turns fraught this exploration of the life of Emily Bronte, but there's no relation between ship and the life of Emily Bronte. So 3 gets eliminated. BF, conflict arises between 2 friends when one of them abruptly ends their friendship. This exploration of the life of Emily Bronte. Again, the 2 are not connected. And AE, as we saw, is wrong. CF was fine, but AE, as we saw earlier, also cannot be formed as a group. So my answer has to be option number 1. So rather than checking each statement separately, go via the options. It will be quicker. So here the answer is option number 1. Now let's move on to the next question. Okay, so one option, the first one is AE. Let's check that. Moonlighting, working a second job on the side, has become a heated topic of discussion in India. Appearance as capital and beauty as currency, but there's no relation between the two. One talks about job, other one talks about capital and currency. So AE is definitely eliminated. Let's check the second one now. The first group is AD. So moonlighting, working a second job on the side, has become a heated topic of discussion in India. Uncover a conspiracy involving shading characters. But then moonlighting is not related to a conspiracy. The two are not connected. So I don't need to check the other options at all. I can straight eliminate option number 2. Now, as we saw, A is wrong. So I'll directly eliminate option number 3. Let's come to AF. Now, as we know out here, because AD is wrong, option 5 also is going to be wrong. So because there's no option called none of these, my answer has to be AF. So my answer has to be option number 4. So see, this is how quickly we can solve these questions. When I know AE is wrong, automatically 1 and 3 got eliminated. I know AD is wrong, automatically 2 and 5 got eliminated. So I'm left only with 4, which is AF. But for the sake of our understanding, let's check AF as a group quickly. So moonlighting, working a second job on the side, has become a heated topic of discussion in India after some IT giants issued strong warnings to employees against it. Now this sentence is making sense. So working a second job on this side, which is also called moonlighting, some IT giants issued a strong warning to employees that you can't do this. It's become a hot topic of debate in India. If you've been following the news, this was going on for the last couple of days, especially with a lot of IT companies like Wipro, Infosys, etc. They have taken strong steps against this. So definitely option number 4 would be the right answer. Let's check the 26th one. The first group is BD and CF. Okay, let's check that. The adaptation does little to show that the celebrated theatre director setting the scene for a new kind of class conflict, but there's no connection between the director and setting the scene. So one definitely gets eliminated. If I check 2, the first is AE. She has learned to suffer her parents' undignified outbursts and immature tantrums with each other. So her parents are having a lot of fights and a lot of tantrums. She has learned to live with that. So AE does seem to be fine. Now let's check BF. The adaptation does little to show that the celebrated theatre director can translate his stage skills to the screen. So there's an adaptation possibly of a play into a movie. The theatre director made the movie himself, but the adaptation doesn't show that he is capable of transferring his stage skills to the cinema screen. So BF also seems to be fine. Let's check CD. The balance of power shifts and the order of things is reversed, setting the scene for a new kind of class conflict. So because there is a power shift, things have been reversed, a new kind of conflict is going to now come. So CD is also fine. So definitely option number 2 would be my answer. AE, BF, CD. Now 3 also has BF and CD but doesn't have AE. So 3 gets eliminated. 4 says CF, which anyway, as we saw, is wrong. And 5 says BECF, that's also incorrect. So my answer has to be option number 2. Okay, great guys. Now let's move on to question number 27th. Okay, so match the columns got over. Question numbers 24, 25, 24, 25, 26. I hope this is clear how we went about this. It's a very easy question type. You just have to do it via the options. The last set is an example, 27 to 30, of what we call sentence jumble. The sentence is divided into 5 statements. There are 5 parts. I have to rearrange them to form a complete sentence. So let's try that out. First is the 27th one. This can also be done via the options. So if you see in the options, I have D as a first line, C as a first line, and A as a first line. Okay. So let's check with D, B, C, E, A. Someone you trust, there is always hope, but there's no connect between D and B. So 1 gets eliminated. On the same lines, 2 also gets eliminated. Now let's check 3. Please speak to, however dark it seems. There's no connection between C and A. So 3 also gets eliminated. Now what I'm sure about is A, B are there together because both 4 and 5 have AB. So however dark it seems, there's always hope. Okay. Please speak to someone you trust and if you are struggling. Now A, B, C, D are still fine, but even I'm saying and if you are struggling, I need something after that, which is not there in 4, unfortunately. So 4 also gets eliminated. So by default, my answer has to be 5. Let's read the order once. However dark it seems, there's always hope. And if you are struggling, please speak to someone you trust. So A, B, E, C, D is perfect. The order is logical. This is an example of sentence jumble. It's always better to do these questions via the options, so one saves a lot of time. Of course, you can also read them directly and try to put them in order if you are fast. We'll do one question that way also, to read it directly and do it. But in the exam, if you feel you're not very fast and you don't have a lot of time, better to do it via the options. The 28th one, let's do it without options logically. Not only violated children's right to electricity, but it also, now as we know, not only but also is always a group. So no matter whatever I do, A and B have to come together. So not only violated children's right to electricity, but it also had a very serious effect. So ABC also seems to be together. The lack of adequate housing on their safety. Now this there, one way of taking a group could be identify a pronoun, see which noun it can be connected to. Now there is plural and the only plural noun in this sentence is children. So this E has to be grouped therefore with that. So not only violated children's right to electricity, but also had a very serious effect on their safety. So A, B, C can come together and therefore D would come at the start. Let's read the order now that way and see. The lack of adequate housing not only violated children's right to electricity, but it also had a very serious effect on their housing. So because there was on the safety, so because there was no proper housing, it violated their right to electricity. It also had a very bad effect on the safety of the child. So is there such an option? Yes, option number 3, D, A, B, C, E. So you can either do these questions directly by reading the parts and using logic, or you can do it via the options. Both methods are okay. I would suggest that do it via the logical method if you can do it quickly and if you have time. But in case you feel that no, there's not enough time to think, it's better to go via the options. So I have two more questions, 29 and 30. One we'll do logically, one we'll do via the options. Let's do this one logically, the 29th one. Then it does become a problem to contribute the way you're contractually expected to if you show up to work all tired and are in no shape. So the idea here is if you show up to work in a way that you're not very tired, you cannot work the way you are expected to. That seems to be the whole idea. So there's an effect, there's a cause and there's an effect. Let's start with the cause, which is in line number D, D for Delhi. So if you show up to work all tired and are in no shape, so if you're very tired and are in no proper condition, then it does become a problem. Okay. So then it does become a problem to contribute the way you're contractually expected to. So D, E, A, B, C could be one way. Or I could also say, if you show up to work all tired and are in no shape to contribute the way you're contractually expected to, then it becomes a problem. So both these orders are fine as per logic. If you show up to work all tired and are in no shape, then it does become a problem to contribute the way you're contractually expected to. Or if you show up to work all tired and are in no shape to contribute the way you're contractually expected to, then it does become a problem. So both orders are fine. I think there should be only one of them in the options because technically both are okay. So A, D, B, C, E, no. D, E, B, C, A, yes, the second order that we spoke about. B, C, A, D, E, no. So that gets eliminated. E, A, C, B, D, no. That also gets eliminated. D, A, B, E, C, but that's again not the one that we spoke about. So my answer is option number 2, D, E, B, C, A. So in this case, both orders were possible, and out of them, one was there in the option. Would they give both the orders in the options? No, only one order will be there. So option number 2, D, E, B, C, A. And lastly, question number 30. Now let's do this via the options. So minimum sentences and under the circumstances, least severe punishment encourage judges to apply the abolish. Okay, now this doesn't make sense at all. So one gets eliminated. Under the circumstances, abolish mandatory minimum, least severe punishment. But I don't need to have minimum and least together. Then both of them are saying the same idea. So 2 also gets eliminated. Least severe punishment, encourage judges. But that again doesn't make sense. So 3 gets eliminated. Now let's check the fourth one. Abolish mandatory minimum sentences. All right. Abolish mandatory minimum, double quotes minimum sentences. Now, if the quote was not there, then this would have been a repetition. But because of the quote, I'm again emphasizing on that idea. So abolish mandatory minimum sentences, and encourage judges to apply the least severe punishment under the circumstances. So 4 does make sense. Abolish mandatory minimum, quotes minimum sentences, and encourage judges to apply the least severe punishment under the circumstances. So EACBD does seem logical. Let's check DABEC also. So under the circumstances, minimum sentences and least severe punishment, abolish mandatory minimum, encourage judges. Doesn't make sense at all. So my answer is option number 4. Okay, guys, so parajumbles or sentence jumbles in this case can be done both directly and also via the options. So either you do it logically or via the options, depending on whether you have time and whether you feel comfortable with the direct approach or not. Okay, all right. So here I've given you the answers once again for all the questions that we spoke about. In case you missed out any of them, you can keep track of it via this also. All right, guys. So with this, I come to an end to this discussion. I hope you were able to figure out whatever it is that we were discussing, all the concepts that we spoke about. I hope it made sense to you. And thank you so much, guys. Have a good day ahead of you and all the best for your exams. Thank you so much.